What if I told you that one woman nearly rewrote the map of the ancient world? Not with swords or armies, but with intelligence sharper than any weapon. A woman who seduced not just men, but entire empires. Her name? Cleopatra. To some, she was a manipulative temptress. To others, a misunderstood genius. The last pharaoh of Egypt, born into a collapsing kingdom, surrounded by enemies, both foreign and blood. Yet from the ashes of power struggles, betrayals, and political games, she rose to command the attention of Rome itself. This isn't just a story of beauty or romance. It's about strategy, survival, and the brutal price of being a woman who dared to rule like a man. Welcome to Mystic Archives. If you're fascinated by hidden truths, forbidden power, and the blurred line between myth and history, you're in the right place. Subscribe and let's uncover the legend behind the crown. When Cleopatra ascended the throne at just 18 years old, Egypt was already fractured, economically weakened, politically unstable, and with Rome's influence creeping into every corner of the Mediterranean, her kingdom was a ticking time bomb. But the real threat wasn't out there, it was inside her palace. Cleopatra was crowned co-ruler alongside her 10-year-old brother Ptolemy XIII. In name, they ruled together. In reality, his advisors wanted her gone. Whispers of betrayal turned into orders. Overnight, Cleopatra was stripped of power and forced to flee her own capital. Alone and disgraced, she crossed the border into Syria. But exile wasn't defeat, it was strategy. In the desert, she began to gather allies. She was no longer a girl fighting for her throne. She was a queen, preparing to take it back on her own terms. Cleopatra knew she couldn't win back Egypt by force, so she chose persuasion. That exact moment, Julius Caesar had arrived in Alexandria, chasing Pompey and seeking order in the chaos. Cleopatra saw more than a visitor. She saw a key, but getting to Caesar wasn't easy. Her brother's men controlled the palace, so she wrapped herself in a rug and had it delivered to Caesar's chambers as a gift. When he unrolled it, expecting fabric or treasure, he found something far more valuable. A queen bold enough to outmaneuver an empire. Their connection was instant, but it wasn't just about romance, it was strategy. Cleopatra needed Roman support to reclaim her throne. Caesar, in turn, saw a chance to secure Egypt's grain supply and extend his reach. What began as an unexpected meeting became a partnership that shook both thrones and whispered of a new kind of power, the alliance of mind and desire. In the Roman Senate, Cleopatra was called many names, none of them kind. To Caesar's enemies, she was the foreign temptress, a snake in silk corrupting their leader. But they underestimated her. Cleopatra wasn't in Rome to play mistress. She was there to secure her future. She gave birth to Caesar's son, a boy named Caesarion, and presented him as the living symbol of their alliance. In a world ruled by bloodlines, this was a declaration of power. While Roman elites whispered scandal, Cleopatra walked through the streets of Rome like a goddess, crowned and fearless. She studied their politics, watched their rivalries, and made friends in the shadows. Every move she made was calculated, because Cleopatra didn't just want to survive. She wanted her son to rule, and she knew Rome's throne could be influenced just as easily from a bedroom as from a battlefield. It was midnight in Alexandria. The palace halls echoed with tension. Julius Caesar, exhausted from battle and politics, sat alone in his chambers, waiting. A large carpet was carried in by two servants. "A gift," they said. He waved them off, uninterested. But as the fabric was unrolled, Caesar froze. There, lying inside, was Cleopatra, her eyes sharp as a blade, her presence electric. No crown, no guards, just confidence. She stood up slowly, met his gaze without flinching. No words were needed. In that moment, Caesar realized he wasn't dealing with another desperate monarch. He was facing someone who understood power the Roman way. That night changed everything. It wasn't love at first sight. It was respect. And in Rome, respect was a far more dangerous form of seduction. On the Ides of the 4th of March 4 BCE, everything changed. Julius Caesar, the man who held Rome in the palm of his hand, was stabbed 23 times by his own senators. As his blood soaked the Senate floor, Cleopatra was hundreds of miles away. Yet her world shattered instantly. With Caesar dead, her protection vanished. Her son, Caesarion, was now a threat in the eyes of Rome's new leaders. But Cleopatra acted quickly. She fled Rome and returned to Egypt, not in grief, but in strategy. She knew power never mourns. It reorganized. And as Rome descended into civil war between Mark Antony and Octavian, she saw another opening. One man had fallen, but the game wasn't over. Cleopatra would choose her next move carefully, because in this war, survival meant seducing destiny itself. When Cleopatra met Mark Antony, it wasn't by chance. It was a calculated entrance. The Roman Republic was tearing itself apart in the aftermath of Caesar's death. Octavian and Antony, once allies, now stood on opposite ends of a coming war. Cleopatra knew she had to pick a side, and she chose Antony, war. But she didn't just walk into his court. She arrived on a golden barge, sails dyed purple, perfume on the wind, dressed as the goddess Isis herself. Even the river shimmered before she appeared. For Antony, it wasn't just enchanting, it was overwhelming. This wasn't a queen, this was a living myth, and Cleopatra knew exactly what she was doing. She offered more than affection. She offered ships, soldiers, wealth, a vision of a new world ruled by East and West together. Rome feared her because she didn't beg for power, she created it. What began as romance quickly became a political force. Cleopatra and Antony lived between Alexandria and Antioch, throwing festivals that rivaled empires, forging plans that made Rome nervous. They had children. They created a royal household that dared to challenge Octavian's dream of total control. But power breeds paranoia, and their alliance painted a target on their backs. In Rome, Cleopatra was again cast as a corrupting witch, a seductress pulling a noble general into madness. But the Senate refused to admit what was plain. Antony had made a choice. He wasn't bewitched. He believed in her, and in their shared future. Together, they declared Caesarion as the rightful heir of Julius Caesar, a move that shook Rome to its very core. The stage was set. The final war was no longer just for power. It was a war of civilizations, and Cleopatra had bet everything on love. The 2nd of September, 31 BCE. The Ionian Sea shimmered under the morning sun, but peace was an illusion. Across the horizon, sails filled the sky. Octavian's navy, led by Agrippa, faced the combined fleets of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. This wasn't just a naval skirmish. Actium was the moment when the fate of empires would be sealed by wind, fire, and betrayal. Antony, brilliant on land, was outmatched at sea. His forces were scattered, supplies running thin. Cleopatra's fleet, strong but isolated, stood ready. But doubt whispered through the ranks. Then the sky turned black with arrows. Ships clashed. Fire crawled across waves. Chaos ruled the water. Cleopatra, watching from her flagship, not as a lover, but as a commander, made her move. Her fleet broke formation, and began sailing south. To some, it was cowardice, to others, a planned retreat. But to Antony, it felt like betrayal. He abandoned the fight and followed her. That decision sealed their fate. Octavian emerged victorious. The dream of a shared empire collapsed into smoke. But this was not the end of her story. Not yet. Defeated, cornered, Cleopatra returned to Alexandria with Antony. The empire they dreamed of, gone. Rumors swirled. Octavian was marching. Allies vanished. One by one, the lights around her dimmed. Then, a false report reached Antony. Cleopatra was dead. In despair, he fell on his own sword. Bleeding, broken, he died in Cleopatra's arms. She was devastated, but not defeated. She dressed in royal robes, entered her tomb, prepared for history to close in. She refused to be paraded in chains. She chose death on her own terms. By asp, poison, dagger, no one knows for sure, but her message was clear. A queen Jesus a queen. And with her, an era ended. After Cleopatra's death, Egypt fell. Octavian became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. The republic was over. Caesarion was hunted down and killed. The Ptolemaic bloodline was erased. But Cleopatra, she could not be erased. Her story outlived the swords, the statues, the centuries, because she was more than a queen. She was a symbol of defiance, of strategy, of a woman who ruled a world that tried to silence her. And even now, over 2,000 years later, her name still commands attention, because legends don't deed, they echo. If you made it this far, thank you. You've just witnessed one of history's most misunderstood rulers, stripped of myth, restored in power. Cleopatra was never just a lover or a queen. She was a storm wrapped in silk. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Mystic Archives. We uncover legends one layer at a time. See you in the next chapter.